Fringe Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime.
Welcome, everybody, to Dark Fringe Radio. I am your host, of course, Will Martinez, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Dark Fringe Radio. Now, tonight, before we get into everything, I just want to remind everybody how you can listen to the podcast. Please go to our website, darkfringeradio.com. That's where you can find everything Dark Fringe Radio there. So make sure you go to darkfringeradio.com. And, of course, our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just look up Dark Fringe Radio there as well. And, of course, our YouTube, Dark Fringe Radio. Make sure you go there, like, subscribe to all our videos. We really appreciate that. All the help that you can give us there is much appreciated. But tonight we have a very a special episode and a special guest. This is a second reoccurring guest, and his name is attorney Mr. Brian Pakett. Now, Brian is an attorney, has a proven track record of having effectively practiced in the field of criminal defense here in Palm Beach County for over 15 years. Attorney Pakett has a career working under the tutelage of famed criminal defense attorney Murray Richmond in the Bronx, New York, before founding his own practice here and bringing his talents to South Florida. Of course, he has a very, very wide understanding of the criminal law and has a very high skill set as a trial lawyer that sets him apart. And he has continuously been recognized as the top criminal defense attorney in Florida and New York, and was recently named top 40 under 40 trial lawyers and listed among the 2021 Palm Beach County Illustrated top lawyers. He has represented clients with a wide range of criminal issues, including homicides, violent crimes, drug crimes, sex crimes, white-collar crimes, federal embezzlement, federal conspiracy, traffic matters, and more stuff that I do not wish anything upon anyone or myself. Please welcome to Dark Fringe Radio, criminal defense attorney, Mr. Brian Pakett. Brian, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well. Thank you so much. Top 40 under 40 was a long time ago. I'm 44 years old and my hair is like prayer. So,
it's we'll have to get you in that. We'll have to get you in that next bracket. That's not a problem. And yeah. And of course, you could, if you have any of these issues that you would like to maybe reach out to Attorney Pakett regarding, you can go to his website, pakettlaw.com. That's PAKETTLAW.com. And then, or you can just reach him out locally here at 561-318-0531. So, Brian, so it's been a while since we had you on the podcast. We had you on, just talking in general terms about criminal defense, attorney, that whole aspect of, doing that, that side of the law. And so now we wanted to bring you on tonight to talk to you about one of the, probably the biggest, I would say, criminal defense, trials of all time with this particular celebrity, with P. Diddy. Now, everybody's been talking about it. This has been a pretty big, wide, stance type of, I would say, trial. Everybody's talking about it. So just in a general terms, let's talk about this case, from a legal standpoint. How serious are these allegations, and, what is he looking at as far as what his allegations are as far as time is concerned?
Well, I mean, it's, first of all, it's so fascinating because it's sensationalized, right? You have sex, you have rape, this is all in the sort of shadow of Jeffrey Epstein and everything else. So not to mention the, am I there? Okay.
Yeah, you're here. You're good.
Not to mention that some of the witnesses in the case are very well-known people, music people in the industry as well. In terms of his exposure, I mean, serious. He's charged with racketeering. He could face life in prison. There's 15-year min-mans, I know, on mandatory minimum time that the judge must impose if he's convicted of, I believe it's some form of sexual, essentially forcing people into having sex when they don't want to. Now, remember, this is the feds. This is not the state. So he can't be charged with rape or the actual, what we call in Florida is lewd and lascivious conduct or sexual battery of some sort. He can't be charged with that. This is the feds, but this is what I call big boy court, right? So he's charged with racketeering and a lot of other things. He's unfortunate. I know his lawyers. I know his lawyers well. They're very, very skilled lawyers. They're very, very good lawyers. And he's got a lot of lawyers. So he's in good hands, no pun intended. But it's a very serious situation given his exposure. He could face life.
Yeah. So, just in general terms, Brian, a lot of people may not be versed in this at all or not, but can you tell me the difference between what he's being sued for as far as civilly, and what's the difference between civil suit and federal criminal suit in this case? I mean, what's the difference between the two, so that way most people can get a better understanding of what we're dealing with here?
So simply, when it's a civil case,
Hmm.
the punishment is money. Is
Hmm.
that the person can be forced by a judge or a jury to pay a sum of money. When it's criminal, the punishment is potentially incarceration, prison, jail, whatever it may be. The difference in the feds and the state, it's complicated. It's not an easy way to answer, but in short, the federal government, which covers all of the states,
Hmm.
um, has their own set of laws called the U.S. Code.
Hmm.
In the states, each individual state has their own laws as well. Um, Racketeering is a good example. If you heard the expression RICO, right, which
Hmm.
word for racketeering is often affiliated with organized crime, mob stuff, that type of thing, um, is typically a federal crime. Now, there are state RICOs, so he could have been prosecuted by the state, but this is, you're in the Southern District. He's in the Southern District of New York. Southern District of New York is the mecca of prosecution in the country. Why do I say that? I mean, El Chapo was prosecuted at the Southern District of New York.
Hmm.
Rudy Giuliani was a former U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. Um, you know, any terrorist situations or people, if Osama bin Laden were alive and were prosecuted, he'd be prosecuted in the Southern District of New York. So it's a big deal where he's being prosecuted and how.
Hmm. So, let me ask you this, Brian. So, this is, since we're dealing with a high profile criminal case here, you know, uh, from a defense aspect, how do you how do you strategize? What happens? What do you do? I'm sure you have to use a different strategy when you're dealing with this type of client versus you're dealing with just a normal client like me, a guy off the street
Sure,
nobody knows. What
what
what what strategy what strategies do you guys employ in this type of
you're
setup?
going to use his fame for the defense. Your defense is going to be around the fact that this is somebody who, first of all, you're going to suggest that this is sort of a witch hunt for people who are seeking money from Puffy. From shows my age, I called him Puffy from P Diddy. But you're also going to use his celebrity in every facet of the defense. So the allegations are alleging, among other things, that he used to have these big sex parties where people were forced into sex, they were drugged, etc. Right? My defense, our defense, what their defense would be or probably is, and I can't tell you. I'm not, there are no cameras allowed in the courtroom in the feds. It's going to be around the fact that this was a very successful man. This is a man who liked to party. There's nothing illegal about partying. It's a guy who used to have the famous white party and everything else. And now it's, I think I saw it today where somebody said that, one of the defenses is going to be that, yeah, he was into crazy sex. Like he was into partying and sex and drugs and everything else. But, the acts themselves is not racketeering. When you
Right.
start talking about forcing people into sex and all the salacious stuff you hear on the news about, I don't know, everything from date rape, drugs being laced in drinks and lubricant and suntan lotion, all this other stuff. Like, it's kind of crazy to think about. But I think the defense is that this is a money grab. This is people who are making the allegations against P. Diddy because they know how much money he has, and there will be a civil suit that follows. Trust me. So you have to use and sort of parlay his celebrity to your defense to say that, this was a guy, just because he was popular and famous and had big parties, he had the ability to have big parties because he's popular and he's famous. He had the money, he had the means to have these big, extravagant parties. That doesn't mean he's racketeering. That doesn't mean he's raping women. Now Jeffrey Epstein, right? Jeffrey Epstein was dealing with underage women. That in and of itself, regardless of you're famous or not, where you are, if you are there and you're having sex with underage people, it's a crime. This is a little bit different in that I think the defense, as I said, is you're going to use his celebrity to not only sort of give a motive why some of the witnesses are lying, but you're also going to
kind of normalize that lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
You're going to normalize his behavior and you're going to legalize his behavior, or
Right.
proper term. But what you're going to do is
Right.
you're going to suggest and say that, he's able to do things and can afford things that many other people can't, including these crazy sex parties. People wanted to go to them. People we all know wanted to go to them because he had these extravagant parties. What happened at the parties, what they can prove went on, it's up to a jury.
That's true. Absolutely. At the end of the day. So in light of, you touched on something earlier talking about the civil lawsuits that will follow, that you claimed after. How do you go about handling the multiple civil lawsuits that are happening now, like during the trial? Like, do you just separate that and just give that to another attorney and say, hey, listen, that's what you got to worry about, and that's, you just kind of compartmentalize things that in that fashion? Or how do you handle that? Or do you just take it all onto one consideration and handle it that way? How do you go about that?
I mean, the first thing is as I said before, we use it, right? So you have a witness on the stand who's going to testify against my client, P. Diddy, and that witness, if that witness has an open lawsuit, I mean, the very first thing I'm going to say to that witness very aggressively is, you're looking for money, are you not? Right? And they can't say no if they're filed a civil lawsuit. Now, smart lawyers will not file the civil lawsuit until after the criminal case is over, because it is impeachment material on the stand. But other than for impeachment material, for a motive as to why someone would testify and lie, or test a lie, as we say, right? Other than that, you are correct. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I know how to attempt to keep you out of prison, out of jail. I know how to fight criminal charges. I don't do civil, right there. So I wouldn't even know what I was doing. It's a different standard of proof. It's a whole different ballgame. So the majority of the civil suits that come out, other than for impeachment purposes of a witness, aren't going to be relevant. A jury will never know about it, other than, like I said, if it comes out to impeach a witness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another aspect I wanted to touch on, Brian, because I always find this particular aspect interesting, is how do you manage the client's behavior when the court of public opinion, of course, is already forming around the narrative. You know what I mean? That, you already automatically have people forming their minds and their narrative about what is and what isn't. So how do you manage your client's behavior during that time? What do you say to them? What do you how do you counsel them and say, what do you do?
It's a great question. First of all, the quick answer is sometimes you don't. I had a trial recently, not recently, it's about 4 years ago now, where I told my client, whatever you do, do not lose your cool. Why? He was charged with shooting someone. If you lose your cool, the jury sees that you have the ability to lose your cool. They're going to convict you in a second and say, well, this is what must have happened on that day. Now, in as little as I can tell you, I myself have never represented Sean Combs. You mentioned Murray Richmond, who I was raised by. Murray represented Shine, who used to be affiliated with Puffy, and I don't remember what the case was. I think it was like a bottle being smashed over someone's head or something like that.
That was a gun case, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go. In Lower. So I don't know what stories I'm allowed to tell, but I have heard them where 20 years ago, Puff Daddy was very controlling. So these are people, we represented Lil Wayne, we represent other people who, they're celebrities, right? So as scared as they may be, they don't want to hear from you. You're their lawyer. They don't want to hear from you. They don't get, and they're going to do what they're going to do. Now, if they have a brain on their shoulders, they know not to react. But a lot of times you have to tell them, the jury's watching. You are not to do this, not to make facial expressions. Sometimes the judge will tell them if they make facial expressions or do this or do that. I don't think Sean Combs is one that I would fear. I've heard he likes to be in control, but I think this is a very humbling experience for him. And he's, I don't think I wouldn't be so concerned about him and his behavior, especially because, I don't know, with all due respect to P. Diddy, he's not, at the top of his game right now. And so he's not as famous. But I will tell you too, interesting, and it's interesting you asked me this question. I got to charge this thing. I saw one of his lawyers was the lawyer for, I think it was Young Gun in Atlanta.
Yes, that is correct.
So if I'm not mistaken, he was the lawyer that famously went to jail for his client.
Correct.
When you have that type of a personality on the defense team, I would bet you 2-1 he was brought into this case at the request of Puffy, P. Diddy. And you bring a guy like that in who has shown he will do whatever he needs to do for his client, he'll listen. He won't. But the short answer is a lot of times you can't. They just do what they're going to do. Federal court, as I told you, I call it big boy court. Federal court is a big deal. Everything in federal court is different than state court. It looks different. The room is more expensive. The prosecutors are more educated. The judge is appointed by the president of the United States. So it's a very intimidating venue such that a defendant, at least in my opinion, is less likely to act out during a trial or is going to be as intimidated as we as lawyers are because of the venue.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, the judge has reprimanded P. Diddy's side of the council there, and he was supposedly, I don't know how this happened, but I guess supposedly he was over looking at the jurors and just shaking his head like aggressively towards the jurors. And so, no, P. Diddy himself. And so the judge warned, his attorneys and told him again, listen, we can't have that. So, I mean, it's odd enough that there's still some kind of, thing about him where he is trying to get people's attention, but, he was smacked down pretty quickly about that. But, and when we talk about this, this whole trial, because a lot of it is a part of a public opinion too, you know what I mean? And, it's just the way things are. But do you think that it's in his best interest to maybe give testimony in this case? Maybe kind of try to normalize himself as a person?
So it's a good question, and I knew you would ask me that question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lawyers, me included. Actually, no, I wouldn't put me in that group, who do not like to call their client as a witness. Reasons you would not call your client. Number one, your client can't behave and will not respond well to cross-examination, being yelled at. Number two is if they have a prior criminal history that you do not want the jury to know about, you will not, if you do, you have opened the door, so to speak, for them to bring that up. I don't know Sean Combs enough to know how articulate he really can be. A mentor of mine always told me that, why would you put your client on the stand? If your client takes the stand and he tells the truth, well, he says, I didn't do it, and he explains how he didn't do it, a jury's just going to look at him and say he lied. He's lying. He's lying to save his skin. If he gets up there and he slips up and he screws up and he says something that really hurts his case, well, they're going to convict him. It's suicide, right? So what good comes from putting your client on the stand? Now, your audience, the majority of jurors, which I ask in jury selection prior to a trial, is most people say the following. If I didn't do it, if it was me, I'd get up there and tell everybody I didn't do it, right? It's hard for a juror to believe that if your life was on the line, if you're facing life in prison, that you're not going to take that stand and tell the truth. But the case will live and die by Sean Combs' testimony. In other words, they will hear from him. I would tend to bet he's not going to testify, only because the level of charges, the extensiveness of the charges, and the factual basis, how is he going to deny all of these things? Now, maybe this isn't a simple he did it, he didn't do it, type of thing. It's a good one. I don't know. I would be shocked. I would be generally shocked if he takes the stand, only because it's such a complicated case, and I don't know that he's as complicated a man to be able to withstand cross-examination. I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, in a case like this, since we're talking about, testimony, How crucial is it, in your opinion, is the witness testimony in this case, where all these alleged crimes span years? We're not talking about, you know, 2, 3 years. We're talking about decades almost, How crucial is that, when you have, multiple, yeah, accusers and all these crimes that are supposedly happening over these decades of years? How important is that testimony?
Enormous, because it's not just one incident that someone's making up. There's
Hmm.
mounds of evidence, which is why if you were to ask me, what do I think is going to happen? I can't see a jury fully acquitting him of everything, because
Hmm.
the defense side, I've had a judge say to me, Brian, you threw enough shit at the wall. Something stuck, right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing with the prosecution. What I'm afraid of for Sean Combs is that there's just, where there's smoke, there's fire. And their jurors, I don't believe that, but jurors do. And they believe that, even if they don't think he did this, he may not have done the racketeering. He may have not been with other people and did this, but he did a lot of bad things.
Hmm.
And if he did even one bad thing that a jury believes he did was wrong, they're going to convict him. Now, they may do what's called split the baby and acquit him of the racketeering, would find him guilty of X, Y, and Z. But your question, it's enormous, because there's just so much, right? I've seen prosecutors sum up and say things like, even if you believe Mr. Pakett when he says that he didn't do this on this day, this day, this day, this day, this day, you mean to tell me that all of these things, he didn't do one of them, right? And that's pretty powerful stuff. So, I mean, the years and the testimony of, I don't remember what her name is, with the video.
Cassie?
Yeah, with the video of
Yeah.
her getting thrown around. Like, that's, to
Yeah.
me, I'm surprised it's admissible, but, and I don't want to elaborate on that because I don't really know the case that well, but, it's pretty, what we call prejudicial, to show that
Yeah.
this, what does being a potential wife beater have to do with whether or not you drugged people and had sex with them? But it was deemed relevant conduct, and it came out, and I think her testimony is going to be pretty damning for him.
So you think out of all the witnesses, it's probably her testimony that's probably going to be most damning, especially with all the, the video evidence and so on and so forth.
Of what I know, I mean, I'm not there, so I don't
Yeah.
know but sure. I mean, who else is, outside of somebody coming forward, which maybe has happened, and says, I was drugged. I remember him drugging me. He had sex with me and other people had sex with me. I didn't know about it. That type of thing. Yes, I think her testimony is probably the most damning. Now, the defense, just remember, we're not at the phase yet where the defense has put on a case.
Right.
They could testify. They could call their own witnesses. I've heard rumors, I'm sure you've heard the rumors or read the rumors, that somebody may testify for him. A couple of rappers, famous people. But you will know, though, who will testify for him, because anyone in that courtroom can't testify for him.
So that brings me to another question that I have, and I think this kind of rolls, hand in hand to what we're talking about. So having witnesses of this magnitude, there's video evidence, backing up what they're saying, so on and so forth. What steps do you take as a defense attorney to challenge a witness's credibility, especially when the defense believes that their testimony is maybe a little bit inconsistent or maybe motivated by personal gain? How do you drop those little grains of maybe of doubt in people's mind?
So a juror is always going to ask the question, why?
Hmm.
So if I, as the defense lawyer, you're on the stand and I'm saying you're a liar, the juror, you have to establish, not legally, but if you want to win, you have to show that jury not only the witness is lying, but infer why they're lying. So as we said before, it may be a monetary thing, right? You're lying, you're making this up, you're saying this happened because you're after money. There are other reasons. Maybe they were susceptible to criminal charges. They may have been exposed to them as well, and they're agreeing to testify in exchange for not being prosecuted themselves. Maybe they were at the parties. Maybe they bought X, Y, and Z, and they contributed their accessories. Whatever the case may be, to have a successful trial, to get your client acquitted, you have to answer the question of why are they going to lie. But there are many ways. I mean, that's what impeachment is. Why are they lying? They're after money. They're trying to save their own skin. They don't like Puffy. They're jealous. They're in the same business as him. And if he goes to prison, her career could take off, or his career could take off. I mean, there's a lot. That's why you'll never see 50 Cent testify, because he has no credibility because he hates Puffy so much.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty well known at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Constantly trolls the guy.
About, like, can Puffy sue 50 Cent? I'm like, for what? They're
what?
public
Right.
figures. They're rappers. Who knows?
Yeah, no, that's it. That's a good question, because, and I'm glad you highlighted that, because a lot of people don't realize that. Like, okay, yeah, what would he sue them for? For what? You know what I mean?
You could sue anybody for anything, right?
Right. At the end of the day,
Doesn't
right?
mean
Yeah,
you're going to win. But
Right.
when you are a public figure, such as 50 Cent, such as P. Diddy, you are held legally to a higher standard in terms of defamation and libel and all that other stuff.
Mhm.
The law says, because you put yourself in the public eye, being a famous music artist,
Mhm.
there are certain laws and levels that one has to prove to establish a defamation case. 50 Cent going on the news saying, if I were him, I would have taken a plea. There's no defamation there, not to mention the higher standard, because they're both public figures. So
Right. Yeah. It's a moot point at that stage. I get it. So let me ask you this. An interesting part that I always found, kind of, just really, really perplexing to me, but it's always interesting to me when you have prior relationships between the accused and the witnesses. So, for instance, like employees, former partners. We're talking about Cassie, ex-girlfriends. How does that come into play during testimony? Is there certain hurdles that you kind of have to get through as a defense attorney in those aspects versus, in just a normal, type of setting?
I mean, you will use their prior relationship to impeach the witness. Maybe there was infidelity and she's upset with Puffy. I'm making this up now, but maybe she was upset with Puffy because of what he did during their relationship. He cheated on her and she wasn't happy about it. So that's why she's lying. But you also, I mean, it's not the relationship that you have to be really careful of. It's the fact that the crime itself, she's alleged to have been the victim of domestic violence and all types of other sexual misconduct. This is a witness who a jury is going to sympathize with. She's, I'm sure female, comes across as very, you got to be very careful. I like to beat up witnesses, right? That's what I do. So I do for a living, to show this jury that this person is a real piece of crap, right? And to show this jury that this person is actually worse than my client or the allegations. When it comes to sex cases, especially such as this, you have to tread very, very lightly, because the jury's going to feel bad for her. And you can't diminish or when you bring up prior sexual acts or anything along those lines. You have to walk a very, very thin line. It's for very skilled attorneys to deal with. They're very, you say ask one wrong question, that juror's going to look at you as a creep. So their past relationship will be used by the defense to argue why she's making this stuff up. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I mean, there's no, if they were married, there are different laws regarding that and what her testimony can and cannot be. They're not married. I don't know what the federal rule is with regards to marital privilege and not. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I don't know who else testified other than her. That's with her.
Yeah, so there was other people. There was also an employee, a security guard of the hotel who testified of being paid $100,000 in cash by Sean Diddy Combs.
To shut up.
Yeah, to shut up, basically keep the everything away. And then there was another security guard that got paid via check by Sean Combs Enterprises. So that I believe that the prosecuting team brought that into light to kind of maybe show the RICO side of it. Maybe I don't know. That's
yes, exactly right.
Am I assuming that correctly, or
you are? If he's not charged with any type of bribery or like what Trump was charged with essentially paying off a witness, that will probably be the racketeering. Is that this was a scheme, and proof of the scheme is that people were paid to not discuss the scheme and that type of thing. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, that's where I think they're kind of shedding the light on that particular aspect of the prosecution. And then another aspect of this whole thing is because it's such a high profile, case here that we're dealing with, Brian. Very rarely do we deal with such a high profile, individual. I mean, who was the last one maybe that was as big?
Oh,
Maybe OJ,
R. Kelly.
R. Kelly, yeah, maybe that, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, what happens like when you're dealing with a guy like this? Like you have leaks and viral videos that come out. Like, what do you do as a defense, like to kind of like stay away from that, or maybe use it to your own advantage, or whatever the case may be? Like, what do you do in that instance?
It's not easy. And the other thing that you're forgetting is that these people have agents. These people have
Yeah.
entourages. These people have
Mhm.
advisors. They have a million people. And you're a lot of times talking to your client, but you're talking to other people. I do a lot of rap work. I do a lot of work for rappers, and they have people upon people upon people who are talking to you and giving their opinion. So it's very difficult to manage.
Mm.
Then the problem that he has, which is the public opinion, right? This is a case that's in the New York Post every day. This is a case that we're doing a podcast on to talk about. I'm in Florida and you're God knows where, somewhere in the dark. And and we're all talking about it. So
Yeah.
the hardest part of this case is picking a jury, because
Yeah.
all the jurors have their own misconceptions. I mean, I have friends, you have friends, all who said, "Did you hear this? I heard he was doing this, and this. Justin Bieber this, and this person that." So with a case this highly publicized, the thing that makes this case so interesting is because, like I said before, the people involved in the parties are all celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
The witnesses are celebrities. So it's a unique unicorn in that regard, in that, plenty of celebrities who we've represented, DMX, Ja Rule, Lil Wayne, these guys, the witnesses against them, or the participants, actually, Lil Wayne and Ja Rule were arrested. Not together, but sort of. But other than that, typically, you don't deal with that, right? You're dealing with a person who's dealing with an alleged victim who's somebody not known. We know almost everybody involved in this. So it's extremely difficult to manage the press, to manage leaks, to manage a lot of leaks, though. You always have to ask yourself, how did it leak and why?
Intentional, not intentional, right?
Now, I'm not telling you, and this is true, I would say it, I've never leaked a story on purpose. That's actually not true. I have leaked stories or I've leaked facts to the press to get it out there to sort of clear my client's name. A lot of times what happens is, too, it's difficult, is your client is going to get really mad at you, the lawyer, for what happens with the media. And not just leaks. Why are you letting them report on this? That's not even true. That never happened. Where did they even get this? I need you to make sure they retract that and this and that. And then the client gets aggressive when they're seeing it. And sometimes, a lot of times, they'll say to you, "Brian, we want our voice heard." Now, I'll never let my client who's charged with a crime, celebrity or not, give a press conference or speak to anyone or anything along those lines. Very rare occasions do you do that. But it's difficult because you're managing your client. Trust me when I say this, Sean Combs is flipping out right now, and he's probably demanding. I mean, like I told you before, I know from personal experience of hearing stories, he's a guy who likes to take his own control of his defense, and he wants it about him. So I can't imagine. I don't know. I can't imagine he's an easy client. I mean, envision yourself representing Trump, right?
Right.
Whatever your political affiliations are, love him, hate him, whatever it is.
You think everything's going fine, all of a sudden he does a tweet. You're just like, what the?
Right. Like, and I've said it to clients.
You're cleared by me first, right? Come on.
Don't do it. They don't listen.
Don't do it. Right.
You think Trump listens? You say you are not to tweet. No, he doesn't listen.
Right.
Don't do that. My clients, non-celebrities, they tell them don't do something and they do it anyway, and then they apologize.
Right. Yeah.
So I can't imagine.
Yeah, that must be so difficult. It must be so difficult. And
the hardest part is for him, I bet, not talking.
What is that?
Not talking over the phone, because all those jail calls are recorded, and there's just
you can't talk freely.
No, and I'm sure he's dying to. I'm sure he's dying to get his name out there and defense and everything else. I mean, that is, of course, if you believe that he's. I mean, sometimes it doesn't happen often. I'm not saying it happens here, but sometimes these guys know they screwed up, and they know. Typically, that's when they take a plea. They don't expose themselves to life in prison, but their offer in the case may not have been. They may have offered him 30 years, and he said, "I'm not taking 30 years." So it's hard to say.
Yeah, I think they offered him 20 years from what
Is that what came out? They offered him 20.
the grapevine, yeah, supposedly. So there where he was like, heck no, I'm not taking
How
that.
old is he?
Well, he's 50 in his late 50s, so that means he would be in
Well,
his
he's
late
almost
70s.
60. It would come out when he's 80. It's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, man, I just, again, like what you said, trying to represent an individual of that nature, it just must be so difficult. And it's, just doing that in its own instance. I mean, that just must be so, so hard.
There,
When you're,
there, there's
go ahead.
people. I will say this to you. I like to think I'm good at what I do. Okay,
Mhm.
I've been doing it for 20 years. My old boss, Mark Agnifilo, has been doing this 100 years. When you have that backing, you do have a way with the client. A lot of times, before you even take their money, you will say to them, "This is my show. This is your life, and this is how we're going to handle this case. If you act out, I'm out."
Mhm.
Right? And they sometimes will acquiesce and do it. Sometimes they don't. So the more experience with lawyers you have, and then when you can take control. Like there are many lawyers who I know who the clients won't mess with. What's his name? I won't remember off the top of my head, but I mean Murray. You wouldn't mess with him. Like he'd walk out of your trial, actually. But so I would tend to think his team has him under control.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Another aspect of this whole case, Brian, and I always find this another, pretty interesting point of this is that what's going to be the fallout? Do you think there's going to be other celebrity fallout from this whole thing? I mean, because this is such a high profile case, you know, today they showed some of the, I guess, video of some of these freak offs to some of the jurors. Um, you know, Obviously it was not able to be picked up by any kind of the media because there's no cameras in there. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, there's going to be other people in these videos that are going to pop up. I mean, what do you think? You think there's going to be a fallout from all this? After this is all said and done?
No, I
No,
think
you
he's
don't
a
think
big
so?
fish, and to be honest with you, I think that what he did or is alleged to have done is unique. I don't think there was many people who were having these freak offs like he was. I liken it to Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think many people had their own islands where they were bringing young women. I don't think there will be much fallout. Might there be people who, like Jeffrey Epstein, are implicated later on in
Mhm.
having been at the parties? You've seen the memes. I don't know what's real and not an AI, but there's every celebrity there is. Jay-Z, their names are all getting dragged through this thing. And what was it? My friend just told me that Dave Chappelle made the joke and said, "I know that I haven't made it because I was never invited to a puffy freak off." Right? So, like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
there will be fallout in the sense that there probably will be tell-all books that are written. There will be, but criminally, I don't think anyone else is going down for this. I really don't.
So let's talk about another aspect of the case here, Brian. So we talk about there's a long historical on this case because this is supposedly crimes that have been committed over a long period of time, over 10, 20 years in some cases. Does his past, public behavior, or maybe even some of his lyrical stuff can be used against him, you think, in court? Or would
No,
that be kind of prejudicial?
no, it's there are laws that specifically protect against that. I think it's Rule 404B is what it's called, which is prior bad acts, let alone prior uh, lyrics. There's nothing unless there was a lyric that specifically referenced something that he's charged with, and even that, unless he testified, couldn't be used against him. It's a fascinating thing when you talk about hip hop rap lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
It's been used many a times. It's been litigated many times, and a lot of people I've represented who rap about all types of things. They're entertainers. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them will admit that half the stuff that they say is just nonsense, that they're full of shit, right? Like I can tell you I won't give you his name, but a rapper, very famous rapper, raps all the time about women and this and that, and he's doing this and that with this and that. He's a married man with kids. Like, he doesn't do that. So that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why they can't use any of his lyrics. Second of all, it's hearsay, and it's no, not the only way they'd be able to use his lyrics would be to try to impeach him should he testify.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Well, another question I had is the volume of allegations, Brian,
Uh-huh.
since just, it just seems like almost like a mountain at this point, just constant allegations. Do you think that creates a cumulative effect in court over time?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not you're not overcoming just one incident. You're overcoming time and years and multiple incidents, multiple witnesses, multiple allegations that it's very difficult to overcome that burden. This isn't one witness who's getting up there and testifying that he did this thing on an isolated day. This is multiple witnesses who are talking about the same thing in explicit detail.
Mhm.
Again, the domestic violence video, I'm surprised that that was admissible evidence against him because I guess what they're trying to argue is that that shows a pattern of behavior. That's where your racketeering comes in,
Mhm.
a pattern of behavior of physical violence. But was that physical violence the same physical violence that they're alleging he did to perform sex acts on people or have them perform sex acts on him? I don't know, but yes, it's a compound problem. I tell clients all the time who have multiple cases, I could be one of them. To expect lightning to strike twice is very difficult. For
Mhm.
a jury to not believe one of these instances. Now, remember, there's lessers. So the lessers, I'm not actually talking for those lawyers out there. It's not the actual lesser, but there are, he's charged with
Right.
racketeering, which comes with a potential life sentence, and then there's lower charges,
Mhm.
sex trafficking. So, the defense's strategy could be, let's beat the top count so he doesn't face life. Let's beat this count so he doesn't face a 15-year min man. That's one way to win, so to speak. Um,
Mhm.
but in the little that I know about the case or how it's going, if you want a prediction, I don't think this is going to end well for him.
Yeah, that was my next question. Yeah, what were your thoughts on what were the final result would be? But it seems like there's just a mountain of evidence against him at this point, right?
They'll convict him of something.
They'll get something out of
I
it,
can't tell you what it is. If it's the top count, he's in big doo doo.
right?
Okay.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
it's not, he'll get through it. It's not the worst case in the world. There's not a dead body. There's not
Mhm.
what I know of as extreme victims who are we would be completely sympathetic towards. I mean, obviously for domestic violence, sure, but like, these aren't underage people. Uh, I don't know who's testified. If there are men or women who say they were raped and that those are real victims, and then I recant what I just said.
Mhm.
But my point being, if he is convicted of something, but not the top charges, I don't know that this judge will smack him. I don't.
Yeah.
My prediction is he'll probably, if they don't convict him of the top count, he'll probably get 10 years. It's my guess.
10 years. Yeah, yeah. Listen, Brian, you've given us a lot of insight on this case. One last question I wanted to kind
Hmm.
of ask you before we let you go, and get your final thoughts on this whole thing.
Sure.
What's the most misunderstood part of defending someone accused of something like this? What's one aspect that a lot of people don't think about, or maybe see, or maybe even are aware of when you're doing something like this for somebody and trying to get them off of some type of serious crime?
I would say I have two answers to that question. The first is, um, you have to understand that there's always more to a story. And my client, may have done some things that were bad. My client may have done some things that were illegal, but not necessarily all of them. And what I mean by that is, you look at this and you say to yourself, well, he's a scumbag. Puff. he's a piece of you know what, and he's a this and he's a that. He deserves this. He's what a creep.
Mm-hmm.
The truth lies somewhere in the middle. That's cliche, but it does. And
Mm-hmm.
a jury has to find him guilty of the elements of the crime in federal court, right? In all court, but in this particular instance, racketeering, for instance, they have to prove that he committed racketeering. A jury may conclude he's a terrible guy. He did this, he did that, but this was not an organized scheme. This was not, even a little element. So there are ways to beat this. People don't understand. There are ways to beat it. I'm not telling you that they will. I'm not telling you that I would. I'm not telling you that they're not skilled lawyers and they're not doing what they're supposed to, but there are. Don't always believe what you read and what you see. And remember, the New York Post makes a living on sensation, right? They're not going to. Where this case will get really interesting is if he testifies. Then everything that I've said for the past hour, you can throw it out the window because it's going to live and die by what he said.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say to you is that what some people don't understand is the definition of winning and losing. And people will come to me and say to me, Brian, can you beat this case? Or can you win? And I will say back to a lot of clients, define what win means. Win may mean you're not going to prison for the rest of your life. Win in this instance may mean he doesn't get life. Win may mean he's not going to get 15. Win may mean sometimes I have to beat this one count. If I beat this one count, then okay, fine. His guideline range is X, Y, and Z. It's low. It's something he's expecting to do anyway. So it's not black and white winning and losing in a criminal case. Sometimes it is, but in this case, it may not be. And what his lawyers may be doing is just simply trying to beat the counts for which there's an extreme level of prison exposure.
If they offer you the case right now, Brian, would you take it?
I have about $30 million as 30 million reasons as to why I would take this case. 100%. Yeah. Yes. Now I will say this before you let me go.
Yeah.
I was consulted to represent someone locally, an athlete. You can figure out the rest. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it because first of all, I've heard that this particular person is not a great payer, but more so, I know this person, to answer your question before, is hard to control, and I'm not going to do it. But if sure, I mean, I would take this case. I mean, this is up my alley, right? This is what I do. I do a lot of work for rappers and all those guys. So
the other case you're talking about, the guy, his last name is a color, right?
You said it, not me.
He
never called me.
So he never called you. But man, when I saw it come out, I was like, "Geez, come on,
his
man!"
His people called me, but I don't. I wouldn't. And then the other one is Trump. I don't know. I could do Trump. I don't because of how loose he is, like loose cannon.
But other than that, control. Yeah.
Puff Daddy. Sure, Johnny Cochran was his old lawyer. I mean, Johnny.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Absolutely right. Well, Brian, listen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Anytime if something comes up and you want to talk about it, if he takes the stand, bring me on. We'll do it.
Absolutely. You can find him at PakettLaw.com. That's PAKETTLAW.com. And of course, you can, if you don't have internet for some reason, give him a call, 561-318-0531. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming.
You're welcome, guys. And remember, quit crying. Call Brian.
There we go. Thanks, my friend. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
All right, man. All right.